Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you very much for coming down to this evening's talk entitled Shaping Futures Through Education and Mentoring. Naturally, as the title suggests, the focus is on mentoring and education, and in particular with the backdrop of our sort of one of our projects that we've been running for now for 17 years, certainly I think the longest standing project is the Saturday School. Just in terms of the school itself, I think it was primarily set up as an educational initiative to raise educational standards. But I think what necessarily evolved from that, and especially as the school grew and we had older children, or children staying to an older age, is that there was almost an element of mentoring that took place as the relationship grew between the teachers and the students. And as the students started to think about their futures and exploring what potential careers they could have, they obviously, they had a natural pool in the form of the teaching cohort. So I think that kind of grew out of it. And within the school we then started to focus on certain aspects such as careers-focused initiatives, as well as other projects to sort of develop the skills of the student base. But the focus today is obviously on the mentoring aspect particularly, and the focus on how that's had an impact on, in this case, obviously through particular students, their lives going forward and their experiences, but also hopefully a chance to explore how that can maybe, be in affecting other children. It is obviously an opportunity for you to find out more of the school if you're not already involved. I think what's also interesting is I've kind of now, for a few years, I've been always doing various events as sort of the 2-minute pitch about Saturday School, and often what we say is, well, anyone who's interested, there are a few teachers you can have a word with. I think what's a unique opportunity today is that we've actually got some of the students who have been through a range of the years who are involved. So, and I think that's almost, partly actually can be an equally interesting insight and potentially why it's such a rewarding project. We've obviously got the 3 speakers who I'll introduce here, but I can see a few faces of some former students who are here as well in the audience. So certainly afterwards it'll be a good opportunity to catch up with them and find out more about the project. Moving on to our actually 3 speakers we're joined with, and who I've had the pleasure of sort of interacting with in the school, if not directly teaching, certainly telling them off probably at some point. But first speaker is Salahuddin Mazari. And actually, before I sort of go through each of them, what's interesting is that each of them almost are representatives of their families who, so we've had, I know certainly several generations, or several, not generations, but several, probably going back, although I don't know, did your father in the school? Several of the siblings of the Mazari family, I think, certainly your older brothers, your sister, did Hamza come as well? No, so everyone's come. Anisa, I know your sister Mona was actually in Safia's year group, and then Maryam, your elder sister, was one. I've certainly taught her, and she was one of the first students I taught as well as Khadija, and then your brother Muhammad as well. So that in itself hopefully is some kind of testimony to the school, and obviously there's Eamon's here as well with his sister. So there's their family have also well represented. But Salahuddin he was one of the students. He was at the school from year 5 to year 10, and he went on to SOAS and King's College to study history and geography. He's now been involved in quite a few community and active community projects and activism. He's been involved quite a lot with Charity Made in Europe as well, and a lot of the environmental work they do. And in particular, I think now he's actually trying to focus on setting up a Muslim fashion blog as well, which he'll touch upon as well. So thank you very much for coming. Our second speaker is Anisa Nachit, whose background is architecture. She was with the Saturday School, and she went on to study architecture at Oxford Brookes University. She did some works as a 3D designer, and is now currently studying her Masters in Holland as well. What's interesting, she was also involved actually with the Quranic pop-up book, The Story of the Elephant, by Shade 7. So Hajra was one of the speakers we had, I think, last year when we did the entrepreneurship and crowdfunding event. So she's obviously been involved with that as well. And then Safia, our third speaker, was involved with Saturday School from ages of 10 to 17. And she actually came after she sort of left school. While she was at university, she taught for a few years at the school as well, which was fantastic. And she studied her undergraduate in biomedical sciences, and then is now taking part in numeracy in global mental health as well. So a range of backgrounds, from effectively humanities to sort of the more practical sciences to then science in itself, pure sciences. Just housekeeping points, so as always we've got our Twitter handles, the City Circle, and we've got hashtag CC Talks as well. If you do want to tweet during the event or otherwise afterwards, if you want to make a comment, it's always welcome. But without further ado, I will pass over to the host for Saturday. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum and greetings to you all. Thank you for coming. What I'm going to say, following what I'm going to say, is not something that I've been paid to say. It's something that's truly going to be coming out of my heart. So the first thing, I guess, about Saturday school, it gave me some of the best role models you could ask for. So the Saturday school teachers were not just people who were successful in their respective careers, whether it was the corporate world or banking or law. They were also role models in terms of religion. So they were people who managed to balance the demands of the working life and the demands of being Muslims. And for somebody who's young and looking for role models, that's exactly the type of people you need. And I'll mention a few names if people don't mind. So I remember there's a couple of teachers like Jibril, Yusuf and Arsalan over here. They were not just successful corporate people, but they were leading our Islamic studies, and they blew my mind intellectually and academically and also Islamically. And then there was this whole idea of mentorship. And there's one teacher who stayed with me for 5 years, and in a sense she became like my second mum, I would say. Her name was Sabah Bahalib, and I think she's the PwC Muslim Network head at the moment. And anyway, she was like not just a teacher, she was a mentor. She advised me in Saturday school hours and outside Saturday school hours. And that relationship continued well beyond Saturday school. I remember when I was fundraising 10,000 for like a Syria project, I hadn't been in contact with her for like 5 years, and then she just found me somehow and donated like £100 to my project, and she wrote on the message, I remember, like, "Boo, I'm here." "Boo, I'm here, like, let's meet up." And I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And then we ended up, she was like helping me with things like job applications to get into like certain corporate companies and everything. And she and one way you really know how somebody cares, like well beyond Saturday school, if they care enough to tell you off if you're going wrong. And at that time I was going wrong coming outside of graduation, and not being very focused the way I was searching for my job. And she kind of pulled me back and reined me in, and I'm really grateful for that. And then also, I think another really, really important thing is how Saturday school really helped my family. I wasn't just the sole beneficiary of Saturday school, it was also my siblings. And I'd like to share a story. So a few years ago, my sister Hiba, she became the first student to go to Oxford amongst Saturday school students. And in that year, owing also to Saturday school as well as her hard work, she achieved 10 A stars. And she achieved the highest grade in the whole of Kensington and Chelsea Borough. And that was much to do in part with some of the mentorship and some of the extra hours that Saturday school teachers would give to their students. And in many cases, the Saturday school teachers were not just people who were involved 10 years ago in my life in some distant past. No, they're still involved in my future to this very day. And I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I was out in Malaysia and Singapore. I was doing an internship. And I went to Singapore and I ran into Andalin Razak and Mansoor Ahmed. And I got to meet their children. And I still have relationships with other teachers. So a couple of times I've babysat some of their kids. And and it's amazing how they looked after me when I was children. And now now they're hoping for me to be a role model to their children. So it's really interesting in that sense. Also, I think what was the single most powerful thing about Saturday school is how the teachers in Saturday school exemplified the ideal of a teacher in many spiritual walks, many spiritual kind of paths, such as Sufism. So how I saw the teacher not as somebody who gave me their vision of life, but somebody who unlocked that potential within me to discover what I was truly good at, and they just opened the door. Like every child has that. Every child is talented and gifted, but they don't always have the means to unlock that. And sometimes a teacher at a critical age, from when you're in year 5 to year 10, can really open that door for you. And it's almost like, I almost compare my situation, how I was, my relationship with Sabah and me, it was like almost like a Dumbledore Harry Potter type of relationship, in the sense that Harry always, he never knew his real potential, and it took somebody like Albus Dumbledore to really open that up. And that's like, I see all of you as, if you don't mind me saying, I always see, like, whoever reads Harry Potter, all of you as like Dumbledores and Minerva McGonagalls helping the Harry Potters and the Hermiones and the Rons. And that's, I think, coming from me, that is an incredible, I hope you take that as a compliment. What I've been doing outside Saturday school. So Saturday school gave me that confidence and that independence to apply for the best of what I was capable of. So because of the discipline and the kind of the daring to achieve the best, so I got into King's and SOAS, and I studied history and geography, and then I got a 2-1, and now I've been involved in MAID, which is an organisation which campaigns on global issues of global injustice and poverty, such as global warming. So I've been involved. So I was recently, a month and a half ago now, we were in Paris, and we were one of the first Muslim delegations to represent at the climate change marches. And that was an incredible experience. And now, at the moment, I'm setting up a blog which celebrates Muslim cultures through the medium of men's fashion, which touches upon my travels across the Muslim world and my various experiences. And it's also like a positive way in a climate where Muslims are being stigmatized at every single juncture of life, to allow people in the mainstream to connect with us, whether it's through fashion, through food, through clothing. And that's one of my passions that I'm working on. And my mentor's actually in the audience somewhere. Zinnia, she's over there in the blue hijab. So shout out to her, and shout out to Shahraz, my colleague from MAID. I guess just to wrap up, what Saturday school teachers do give to their students. First, they unlock that potential from within. And a lot of students people who are from really deprived social, economic background, they give them that vision to dare to dream, to dare to be big, to not be mediocre and not to be stifled by your circumstances. And that is one of the most powerful things you can give to a child and to give to a teenager. Another thing, just give somebody independence. Because in some cases, what teachers don't do properly in some schools, they either spoon feed you or they don't help you. Whereas in Saturday school, I found there was like a perfect balance of giving you like resources, time and investment, but also challenging you to be independent and apply for things like jobs for yourself. And they'll read over your application, but like make you do the work yourself. And also just the last thing I will say is Saturday school teachers, they'll never just be with you those 5 years that you were there at Saturday school. They're going to be with you for the rest of your life. And I can really testify to that. And there's still Saturday school teachers to this day who I have very strong contact with, and they're almost like family to me. And inshallah, at one stage of my life, when things have settled down a bit, I'd like to give back to the Saturday school. I'd like to also shape young minds and see like 10, 15 years down the line, somebody talking about how I influenced their life.
Now, passing on to Anisa, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I just want to say it's really nice to see some of the teachers I recognise here. I do feel a bit old, but I don't know how you guys feel because I'm not one here. But so I went to Saturday school when I was about 14 and left around about 18. And one of the things I was telling Arsalan earlier is how I used to take 3 buses to get there from North London with Sophia's family as well, which for me sort of shows the pure dedication, how much I loved going there. And as Salahuddin was saying, the teachers for me were real role models, especially at the beginning when you're 14 and 15, because when you're at school, your teachers are just teachers, but when you were able to go to Saturday school, you could really meet young professionals, and it gave you an insight to that working world. And especially for me, because I was the eldest in my family and the first to go to university, there was no one I could sort of talk to about that. And so for me, just to be able to speak to teachers, they could give me an insight into that working world, an insight to university, and sort of get me up and geared about it, and give me that motivation to work a lot harder for that. And what was, for me, I really believe that the reason why I was able to go into architecture is because I was able to meet teachers who knew other professionals about architecture, give me an insight to that. And I was able to meet one particular teacher called Sarah Khaled, and she was also an architect. So I remember spending many evenings after school talking to her about it, so I could try and formulate my ideas and why I wanted to do architecture, and just to hear opinions on that was really beautiful for me. And one of the things that really struck me was this mentorship and this role models, because you really had people that you could look up to and push you, especially because I did maths there, and that really helped me with my confidence in that, and I could go back to school and have that extra support, especially because my parents couldn't obviously afford for me to have private tuition, so to offer that a place for students who really want to do well for themselves but have something lacking or some confidence was really a wonderful opportunity in that case. And what I also really liked was, which I loved going, and Shaymat used to run them as well, was Islamic Studies. And for me that was really, really beautiful, because I remember it was an opportunity where students could come together and have such an open, healthy discussion about Islamic issues, especially when you're like around those teenage years and people are starting to ask you questions about your religion. And so it all gave you a platform where you could just throw out all these questions and have these discussions amongst your teachers, but also amongst your peers. And just to have an opportunity, a place of gathering, I think that's really, really important as a development for young adolescents. And I remember, I don't know if Shayna remembers this, but I remember when I was about 17, I went up to her and I said, I just wanted to be like you. I really, really remember that. I sort of really looked up to my teachers in that way. The confidence was a really important thing which the school gave me, and the mentorship, and really the teachers weren't there just to just leave, your teachers were there, they helped you through them, I could email them, and any questions that I had throughout the week, I could sort of really have a relationship with them, and that was really, really important, because you have such an intimate relationship with these teachers that you wouldn't have at school, and to be able to see them as your role models, and professionally, but also in an Islamic way, that was really, really wonderful and very important for me as a development in my case. And also just to have the relationship outside when you leave for uni really helped me in my development throughout the years. So I had a wonderful opportunity after I had finished my bachelor's. And I remember it was 2012 and there weren't many jobs going out there, so I sort of received many rejection letters after rejection letters for job offers. So I started to think, right, I'm just going to fill up my time with skills and keep myself occupied with courses. And I remember that City Circle had an event happening, which was a photography course that they were running in Al Manar. And obviously I hadn't been there back in a couple of years, so I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do, it's going to be wonderful. And I went there, did a course, and I had the opportunity to exhibit some work at an evening at the V&A. And because of that event, I was introduced to a lady called Hijay Mamun, which Arsalan just mentioned, and I had an opportunity to become the illustrator for the first children's Quran pop-up book. And from there, it was a really nice opportunity to work with people within that circle, because they help you get into that professional world, and I was able to sort of push my creativity in different directions and sort of be okay with the fact that I wasn't able to get to where I wanted to. And then, everything's written in that way, because I was able to get a job after that, and I was working alongside in that way, and I was able to freelance other projects in the design world. And just being connected to my teachers in that way really helped me. And I would completely agree with Sohadina. Inshallah, when I finish my masters in the Netherlands and I could come back to London, I would definitely come back and teach, because just the opportunity to have that relationship with the children, really, it does more than what you think, because we all look up to you in this way, and you really are role models to these children, and they just sort of admire you in that way, and you sort of set a pathway up for them. So I would love to be able to give that back to a child, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Now moving on to Safia, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. I was a student at the school from the ages of about 10 to 17, so I was there for quite a while as well. And I only stopped because they didn't offer my examination board for maths, because I was doing a completely different one to everyone in the class. But I wasn't ready to leave the school yet, basically, because it kind of becomes like a family. I've been there for so long, it's like I grew up, and a lot of the teachers that are here have seen me grow up, which is a bit weird. But it's basically becomes like a family. And so when I went back there to teach, at first I was just a bit okay, wow, a few months ago I was the one sitting on the table, and now I'm in the canteen with the teachers at lunchtime. And then it would just be all of everyone else who's still studying, they'd be so what's going on? What are the teachers saying? I'm just oh, well, I can't really say that. But it was just me. I was teaching the younger years, so I taught years 4 and 5 whilst I was there. And because I didn't really want to go into anything too advanced. But it was really nice because it wasn't me by myself. Usually you're with one other teacher or 2 other teachers sometimes, because then it helps you alternate. If something comes up and you take a day off, there's someone there to back you up. And it also helps when it comes to helping the students. And that's one thing I really felt, whilst I was there as a student and a teacher, having that extra support. And because the classes aren't as big as a standard school, and you've got the extra help there, it means that you can really help out the students that struggle and that maybe would otherwise in their normal schools would get ignored. So if there was a student, for example, who really struggled with reading, one of us could take them out to a different classroom and then just go through reading with them. I don't think so. Yeah, so we just be able to offer that one-on-one if it ever needed to happen. So especially I felt being able to do that with students at a young age, and to be able to help them and instill that confidence in them at that young age. So maybe I thought it would be able to help them further on in education.
No, you carry.
But whilst I was there as a student, as the other 2 have mentioned, it's not just your standard teacher-student relationship. Because of the fact that you're not in that kind of rigid school structure, and it's more of a one-on-one, you can get more advice. So with my personal statement for university, I sent it to I think it's Shingma, I sent it to Ramiz, I sent so many to him. Ramiz has been my reference for every single job I've ever applied for. So he's helped out with a lot of stuff. I think Mona as well, just someone else who's in my year, and Anissa's younger sister, she just always uses Ramiz. And my oldest sister still uses Arslan as a reference. It's I don't even think they ask anymore, they just put it on and you just yeah, okay. But it's it stays with you, and they email and they check up on you and say, oh, what's going on, what are you doing now, you're graduating about now, what are your plans and stuff, and they really check up on you, and they actually care. It's not okay, he'll go and see you, but they keep up that relationship. And whilst I was at the school, they provided me with so many other opportunities. So when I was in, I know it was 2010, I think. When did we do the first charity?
Yeah, the first one was, I think it was 2010 actually, yeah.
It was, I think.
Yeah.
It was when you'd just all done your GCSEs, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was that year, yeah.
Yeah, so we got the opportunity to take part in a charity dinner to raise money for the Citizens Foundation, which basically funds schools in Pakistan to provide education for children there. So we got to take part in the charity dinner, like other peers in my year, and we basically hosted it. And it was just it was a great experience. And there was like an auction, and we didn't do the auction, Ish did the auction, but it was a really nice experience. And the fact that we were able to help underprivileged students who otherwise wouldn't have been able to access that kind of education. And I remember so clearly, like, us learning about that charity and the work that they did, and just being able to do that. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do that experience if I hadn't been in the City Circle Saturday School. And then a few years later, we managed to do it again. So it was like twice, and I think we funded the school for a year.
I think 3 years. 3 years, I think.
Oh,
altogether,
okay,
because
3 years.
I think we raised more than needed in the first year, so 3 years altogether. I think 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, so be able to know that we'd helped fund that, and it's all owed to the City Circle. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been able to do that. And they helped us out so much, and they helped us out with inviting guests, because we were like 16, 17. Our social circles weren't that big, so they helped us out a lot with inviting people, advising us on how to we had to create all these flyers and posters and stuff like that to draw attention. And it was just to reiterate, it's just something that I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. And they also offered workshops at the school where they bring in people to talk. So I remember clearly there being a careers day, and they brought in loads of different people from different professions. And I think from a young age I was always interested in the sciences. And when you're interested in the sciences and you want to help people, the most obvious thing to go into is medicine. And obviously your parents are very proud to hear that, but it wasn't I wasn't 100% sure that was what I wanted to do. And I went to that careers day, and I remember there was a woman, I can't remember her name, but she was a doctor, and she was just saying there are so many other things you can do. You can go into research, you can become a scientist, go into policy, stuff like that. And it just helped instill in me that, there aren't these really narrow set paths that you have to go on, the generic routes, that you can branch out a bit and explore more in what you want to do with your life. So, and they didn't really, it's at school, it's they offer it, but it's not, you don't have that one-on-one opportunity, because there's just so many people, and you'll have other students who will just hog the speaker for the entire time, and you're just okay, well, I can't really talk to them now. But at Saturday School, because you're already exposed to your teachers who are from a range of different professions, and then they bring in other people from different professions, so you just get to have the opportunity to meet so many different people that you wouldn't otherwise meet at that age. And it just opens your mind up to what is out there for you, so that from a young age you're already thinking, I don't have to go down these generic pathways that everyone tells you to go down. I can think outside the box and do what I actually really want to do. And they help you along with that. So thank you to the City Circle Saturday School.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I think this is a hit and miss microphone anyway. We'll now open it up for questions. Again, just to say that if you want to address it to any of the specifically speakers, then feel free to. I guess given a lot of this is about experience and stuff, it may be interesting just to hear if everyone maybe just says a short comment in response to that. Obviously, if you've got any questions on the broader school as well, I'm happy to sort of take those as well. But and keep the questions obviously reasonably brief. If I find sort of maybe they go a bit beyond that, I may sort of cut you off, but it's only in the interest of brevity. So without further ado, any questions from any of the floor? You want?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, it's not a question.
I just wanted to say thank you guys for doing this sort of thing. Every time I come here, it's amazing. And you guys from the school, amazing. That's what I've said. alhamdulillah and shukran.
Okay, great. Thank you, Supplementary. Thank you so much. Any question? Anyone else? Okay. Take you and then that's it. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of that Quranic the pop-up book for Surah Al-Fil, the story of the elephant. I invested in it when it was on Kickstarter. I got some free copies. I've been giving it out to all my nephews and nieces. Absolutely love it. So mashallah, like excellent work on that. Just wanted to ask if you're, if that's the kind of stuff you do. Are you actually an architect, and do you do more illustration stuff on the side? And is that just something that you is that a passion project that you kind of do on the side as well? Because I think, mashallah, it's absolutely excellent, and in my opinion was one of the most innovative things coming out of the community, where it was something high quality, educational, and just something that we really, really needed for the kids. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for such lovely comments about it. Well, actually, the whole idea behind it, the brains behind that, was Hajira herself, the author and the manager of the whole project. And I was there to help her as an illustrator and formalise the pop-ups themselves. I do obviously as part of, when you're studying architecture, there is an innate need to want to draw and visualise mental imagery down on paper. So that's a natural thing I love to do, and to be able to illustrate on the side, it's something that I would like to keep carrying on. But as for now, obviously my drawing skills are sort of set down into architecture at the moment because I'm in my final year of masters. But in terms of how I graduate, I don't know where it will lead me. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think I've seen that there's a second book. I think it's like a wudu book. Yeah. I think it's probably published. Is that right? Or
Yes,
yeah. Brilliant. So I think there's more on the way. Oh, you could have got it signed actually if you bought it. You missed a chance though. But anyway, yes.
My name is Larson. I'm a lawyer. I've been mentoring with Mosaic, which is not as intensive as Saturday school. They go to areas to be private areas and have a 10-week or 12-week mentoring period. And I've been doing work with the mothers and daughters in Tower Hamlet. The daughters were 10 years old and the mothers obviously various ages. And now as of next week, I do some mentoring with 16-year-olds in Uxbridge. And I just wondered whether of the mentorees and mentors, I found that the children girls were easy. In fact, they're very kind of keen to please the teacher, they're very keen to work. I mean, they're giggling a lot, but otherwise, as there's no discipline problem or anything. What is your advice in dealing with 16-year-olds? I'm kind of quite terrified of them.
Anyone particularly? Take it, or should we pass it? So I think everyone can maybe say their own perceptions. Oh, okay.
Okay, all right. In fact, you've got younger brothers, sisters, so that probably helps.
Okay, well, I would say I find sometimes a lot of the problems they're facing, sometimes they have a cause outside the context that you're seeing them in, and just get to know them on a personal basis, and see if you can even help them with what they're struggling with. So sometimes they might have domestic issues, they might be going through things, in your context they might be going through things like abuse, or they might be going through things like that. So it's always good to let that person know that you're there for them. That's what I would say.
Anything to add?
Yeah.
I think maybe at a younger age it's okay to be enthusiastic. I think maybe when you get to age 16 people see it's less cool to be enthusiastic about education. But from what I've experienced anyway. But I feel that maybe changing methods of teaching, so maybe trying instead of just maybe making it more interactive in the way that makes them they have to be interactive or something like that. But otherwise I can't really think of it because I was teaching the year 4s and 5s, so they were always but when I was that age, I think maybe just changing the teaching style, because they're already getting that, teacher standing by the board 5 days a week, they're getting that all the time. So maybe changing it up, using different methods or something to make it more interesting, and then they'll maybe be more willing to participate.
I agree with Safia in terms of the teaching methods, but I think in terms of how you would apply that, I think it's really important for these kids to show them that they to help them with an internal locus of control. So to show that they have the control over their results. Because sometimes kids who have lower confidence, they can't understand that they leave everything up to chance whether they will do well at school or not, and to be able to highlight to them that they are in control over their actions and therefore their results are because of what they've done. And I think once kids can have a higher locus control, they can really understand that, and that gives them more motivation to be able to actually put the time and effort into studying and doing the work.
That's right. Thank you very much. Could you also tell me a little bit about Saturday school? Is it open? Because when I go to the school in Uxbridge, could I tell them about it, for example?
Yeah, so just very briefly, again, without sort of stinging away. So we've got a school, there's two at the moment, we're looking to potentially set up a third, which I'll touch on actually till the end of the talk. So we've got one in West London, near Westbourne Park, which actually these are where the 3 students came from, which is, I suppose, the first school which has been running now for about 17, 18 years. And then we've set up another one in Harrow in Middlesex, which has been running now for a few years, and that only goes up to year 9, so I think it's about 14 years old, 13, 14 years old. I mean, the principal focus is sort of an hour of maths, an hour of English, but then obviously through that interaction, this sort of the mentoring element comes in. So there's no real formal mentoring session as such. It's more, again, through the relationship that builds up with the teachers. We do have things like the careers fairs and so forth. It's open certainly to volunteers and students as well. But I guess the focus is for people who want to have that kind of, very much who will come every week and who are going to focus on that academic advancement. I mean, what we kind of, what we say is what we're trying to sort of create is an atmosphere that's advanced. It's sort of offering high quality educational standards and offering opportunities that children may not have. But what we're not really doing is just saying, well, some of these children don't necessarily have many opportunities, we're just going to give them something that's better than nothing. The idea is really to actually push them to excel. So, the kind of the sort of mantra, the target was we'd always say that we want all the children who sort of certainly come into the school at a younger age and then stay up to their GCSEs to get a B grade in English and Maths. And that would be sort of the promise we give to parents. Versus the average of C. So it's not just about, it's about trying to get them to aim high. I mean, touching specifically on your question, I think from the experience at Saturday School, I think one of the reasons maybe it's this kind of the mentoring comes a bit more naturally is, and maybe with the older children, is that the teachers they're sort of presented somewhere between, I guess, an older sibling and the parents. So they sort of, I mean, I know it's simple things, but the fact that on Saturdays, people ultimately wear what they want, there's no sort of formal dress code. These kind of things I think help break the relationship down, so that often the children can actually find they can maybe speak to the teachers, who in many cases may be of a similar sort of age as their parents, or their teachers at school certainly, but they can, I think, certainly feel that there's maybe a slightly different forum and a different atmosphere, and I think that's critical to create that different space. And I think the other thing is that with the as the children were in that 16 bracket, when again, like what we tried to do, and some levels, Sophia's evidence that she was when she started becoming a teacher, is then to recognise obviously there's that element of adulthood and not to be necessarily so prescriptive about X, Y, Z, but at that point they're effectively not children, they're young adults, and they can sort of explore things. So that's something we've always tried to do, and in the Islamic Studies as well, what we sort of offer for the younger children is probably something a bit more creative and fun, but for the older children then we try to have a more discussion-based setup, for example, so they can explore the issues themselves rather than being told X, Y, Z is right or wrong. So that's certainly sort of what we adopted the Saturday School. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there a question on the back? Or? Yeah. Starting, yeah.
Wow, sir.
You mentioned that the teachers were sort of like vulnerable for you, and given that they've done so well in their careers and respective career disciplines, but they're also role model for you on sort of like Islamic level. Could you sort of like elaborate on that, how that?
Yeah, it's really good. So there was one particular teacher whose name was Yusuf, and he used to give some of the most mind-blowing lectures on Islam. And just like things like the intricacies of the angel's relationship with Allah and all these, and like topical issues that we were facing, how to be a good Muslim in your school context, that was particularly important. So it was not just teaching you basics, how to pray, it was also how to apply being a good Muslim in whatever situation you were in life. How to, like for things like as a young child when you're 15 or 16, things like how to respond to things like dating, how to respond to things like relationships, and at that particular age you need that sort of advice, otherwise you could go off the rails. And to have like, alhamdulillah, I never went off the rails, but my Saturday school teachers and my parents made sure of that, and you'd see them outside. Another thing in terms of Islamic role models, you'd see a lot of those teachers, and not just in your Saturday school context, but for example, you went to an Islamic talk or a charity event, and you'd see a lot of your Saturday school teachers there.
I'll just follow up on that. The lectures were presumably in Islamic Studies lectures, were they? It wasn't in the middle of your maths lesson that you started getting.
Yes, they were separate afterwards.
So, in most cases, 95% of the time I used to go to my Islamic lectures, but a couple of times I did.
If I didn't think once or twice, if I didn't think it was interesting enough, then I would. What's the word? I'd kind of slip out after Dhuhr prayer. But in most cases, I actually attended them, and it was a testimony to how good they were.
Well, the doors have locks now. It doesn't happen nowadays, but we've learned from that.
Yes, I'm in the back.
What was your motivation for going to Saturday school? Were you forced to go by your parents, or did you actually enjoy going every Saturday morning?
I think that's something everyone can sort of touch upon, so should we start with Safia?
Okay, so I think as Lisa mentioned, like we both live in like northwest London, so it took quite a while for us to actually go to Saturday school. We had to wake up early. I think when we were younger, it was a bit like, on Saturday, I don't want to wake up early, I just want to like sit home and watch cartoons. But I think...
And that's just the teachers, isn't it?
Yeah, as a teacher, no. I think just like, because you get to meet new people as well, like it's not, it's, as well as that relationship you have with the teachers, it's the classmates you have, like you meet different students and that you obviously wouldn't meet otherwise because you're from completely different boroughs. But it was nice to just meet other people and just to catch up with them and just to like, it was kind of like another school, but it was more relaxed and like you didn't have homework sometimes we did get homework. But yeah, I don't know, I just think because I enjoyed it and you had something, like sometimes you had something to look forward to, like they'd be like, okay, next week we're going to look at this, and then you'll be thinking like on Friday, like, oh, I'm going to be doing this tomorrow, and you'll actually look forward to it. So I think the way it was presented, it wasn't like a chore, like sometimes you'd see normal school as, so because of that more relaxed environment, you didn't feel like it was such a tiresome thing to like go there on a Saturday.
Same for me, I really enjoyed going, and I think because it did feel like a family, and as Safi said, the classes were very small. Sometimes my classes would just be me and another girl, and so if I didn't turn up, then it was just the teachers just turning up for one person, you know. So you sort of felt a responsibility to go to that as well. But also, I mean, what I liked about going there, during the week at school I'd have questions and I wouldn't have been able to answer them with my teacher just because the schedule was too busy. So it was really an opportunity for me to go there and, you know, put down the table the things that I was getting stuck on. But I also really enjoyed working with teachers because we'd also crack a lot of jokes with them. They really, as Arslan said, they weren't such, you know, like teachers. It was sort of in the middle level where you could sort of relate to them in some way, talk to them a little bit, but also they would be there to help you.
I'll be honest at first, so my dad did press gang me into going to secondary school. So, you know, I was on a Saturday, I had already had Quran class afterwards, so I was like, it was like 5 days a week and Saturday school. But then I came to love it. So some of the things we'd get up to, so we'd go to, there was always that yearly trip to Thorpe Park or Chessington, and the teachers would be just as excited to go on the ride as we would be. So that was an experience. And then like sometimes teachers going out of their way to do amazing things. There was one teacher who took us to ride in his Ferrari or something like that, or his Porsche. So it was fantastic. And then there was like the annual sports day where sometimes we'd race each other, race the teachers, and we'd see, and like I think as I mentioned, like a lot of the teachers, they were not, some of them were like just out of university, just started their professional jobs, so you felt they were like older brothers and sisters, so they were just having as much fun as you were. So I actually looked forward to it. And then yeah, again, just everyone's mentioned that they were like family, and you know, my teacher Sabah, like I looked forward to coming in because I knew she was always there to help me with whatever problems I was facing, like mathematical or pastoral.
Brilliant, thank you. Just to say that it's not a precursor to joint have a Ferrari. You can get away with an Oyster card as well. Yes, gentleman back and then Shema. Yeah.
I've been here many times in the past and I've always enjoyed the sessions here. And mashallah, tonight I'm thoroughly impressed with the young man and also the young ladies, because I have been a tailor for the last 40 years and I studied at the London College of Fashion and graduated in, well, over 40 years ago and I'm still working, although just by the grace of Allah, I wasn't even looking for a job and somebody called me and they were asking for a master tailor. I'm working in the area now, so if ever you need any help with fashion, design, making, cutting, I'm the man.
Certainly, Saladin will probably catch up with you afterwards for his blog. Brilliant, thank you so much. Shema, yeah.
Firstly, I'm super proud of all of you, so well done for inspiring us today. One of the things you've all said is there's a lot of praise for the school, but I wanted to see from your viewpoint as students, are there any things that you think we could improve as a school, we could do better?
No. I'll give you maybe, again, I think that's something everyone can sort of touch upon, so let's, we spoke last at the start. Sophia? So you don't get much time to think.
I think because I've been there as a teacher as well, it's actually quite hard to think about things.
It doesn't have to be a bad thing, is it?
Yeah, it's like okay.
Start with lunch.
Yeah, lunch.
Yeah.
Better lunches, please.
Or if there are other things that could be offered, maybe.
Yeah, bring back the chips.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when they were like 50p, weren't they? And then then they ended up being £1. We were all really upset about that. But I think maybe like resources. I think especially with the younger year groups, like especially when I was teaching, just having that, like we didn't want to do the constant just standing by a board and like writing on the board and having them learn from that. We wanted to have like, you know, cards or like balls or something like that, something fun to make it more interactive. So I think maybe introducing more like resources for like different types of learning for the students, because like when you're at school, it's just that one set curriculum that you follow, and like, you know, not everyone, that's not applicable to everyone, not everyone learns in the same way. So I think Saturday school is a good way to like cater more to different types of learning. So maybe like having more resources for that.
Well, I don't know, because I left quite some time ago, but so I don't know how much has changed since then. But I think from my experiences when I was younger, I think I would have liked to have seen more workshops. So, because you talked about Careers Day, I don't remember having that. So obviously things have moved on since then. It would have been nice to have maybe some creative workshops, like the one that I did 2 years ago, like photography workshops or any that sort of thing, because just to engage children more, I think that would be really nice, really nice.
Honestly, it's actually difficult to find what I say could be improved, but maybe, as I said, from when I was at Saturday school, like Anissa, I found, so I don't know how much has changed, but it'd be interesting, like if there was more things like regular sports things, because you know, when I was 15, 16, I was quite a boisterous young lad, and liked playing football, liked fighting, like all these kind of things. And if there was like, I don't know, like a boxing class every now and again, like young boys and girls, like whoever's gifted with this kind of things, like skill sharing and this kind of thing, that would be interesting because it helps kind of like, what's the word? Tame energies, as they say.
Thank you very much. No, I think all very good. And I think also, actually on that point, on those things is, with volunteers, I think there's always plenty of things to do. So, I mean, obviously here, if you've got, like I said, these sort of skill sets that you think you can bring to the table, whether, like I said, it's a creative talent or hobby, or even in your professional capacity, or likewise in the sporting field otherwise, then we're always open to kind of, you know, take those on board if you're prepared to lead that project. Even if it's not specifically within the school, if you want to do a project, you know, for children or for the youth or something like that, we can do it maybe outside the context of the school. So from a broader city circle perspective, if you've got something and you want to run with it, that's very much how the city circle works. It kind of, we're happy to encourage that and sort of use our network and channels to maybe help get volunteers and so forth. So we're always open to ideas, certainly. So yeah, thank you for that.
You've all talked about role models and seeing your teachers as role models. What age were you roughly when you actually started thinking that?
Yeah, I think maybe we can touch upon that, so it's okay. Yeah. Sorry, you went last when you were speaking, so that's the...
I think because I was interested in science, the sciences in particular, and I remember she met at the time when she was teaching like my year group, she'd been doing her PhD at the time. So I think just like the general advice that they give to you, like she helped me out with my personal statement, she helped me out with just in general career advice, university advice. So in terms of age, it was like that age when you're starting to pick like more specific subjects for your A-levels or starting to apply for like university, just throughout those years when you really need that guidance. And sometimes at schools, like mentioned earlier, either they spoon feed you too much or they don't give you enough advice. So I think in Saturday school, like you're able to meet people from different professions and then ask them like how they got there, what they did, any advice they can give you in particular. Yeah.
I completely agree. I think it's when the moments when you start having to make choices at school and taking responsibility over that, you start to look at examples that you can rely on. So I would say around 16, 17, when you're thinking about GCSEs, A-levels and university, that's when you really start to see them as your role models. Yeah.
I guess, I always saw them as role models, but I think the best thing was to see people who were Muslim, who were in like professions, and there wasn't, like at that time, at least 10, 15 years ago, there were very few of those people, and those few people were at Saturday school. So then they became your role models, because they weren't just like, they were different to your teachers. Your teachers, for example, like as a young brown ethnic minority, my teachers were like most often white, for example. They didn't understand my struggles. They didn't understand how it really was. And there were people at Saturday school who'd gone through those sorts of struggles and gone through like similar schooling experience, yet they still managed to make it out the other side. So that's when they truly became role models.
Thank you for your talk today. I'm going to ask, you all three of you seem to have gained a lot from your experience with the school. Do you think that was common to the majority of your people, your fellow students? Or do you think because you put in that extra effort or paid more attention or for whatever reason, you guys gained more from it than perhaps other kids did?
I think definitely needs to be like a two-way thing. Like obviously they wouldn't, like sometimes a student would turn up and they wouldn't really participate in class. It's like the teacher does what they can. But I think because I'm seeing this as like a perspective from being a teacher as well, it's like it can become quite like frustrating. Like you know in your mind that you really want to help out the student, like you can see they're struggling, but then they're not like putting it back in. So I can see how maybe those students wouldn't maintain that sort of relationship, but I think the fact that they're there consistently, like they're constantly showing up, like it does help, like with your grades, like regardless. Like I remember in my year, like everyone got like a B or above, and then like maths and English GCSEs because of the help that we were getting in Saturday school. And like they were so thorough, and they'd set us extra work, and they went, like I remember I had like in I think year 11, I had Ifat and James, and they'd print us off all of these like exam questions for like particular topics, and they'd compile them all together for us every week, and then we'd do it for homework, and then we'd go through it. And it's like, even if you're not actively participating in the class, it's going to help you out in your studies. So maybe not as much on the pastoral, like that side of it, if you don't like give back as much, but definitely for academics, I think everyone did see like a positive result.
I mean, I still speak to some of my peers who are in my year, and we still talk about Saturday school and how much it has affected them, definitely. I think sometimes what you find when you start a new school, some people come in with a head on, and some people come in who are very disruptive, but you find that a couple of months in, those people who are disruptive end up studying and behaving themselves just because of the example that their peers are setting, or the fact that their teacher is there every single time. It formalizes something very stable for them. And I think that stability is what is quite important for young kids who are struggling, and trying to help them build up in their confidence.
I guess it's never about, we always knew whether we achieved what we wanted in life or didn't achieve it. We always knew that teacher cared far beyond what our teachers at secondary school, primary school would care. And I remember like our class was an eclectic bunch, let's just say, for the sake of a better word, from very disruptive people and very studious people. But our teacher Sabah she was like an older sister to all of us. So she took us to visit her parents. She took us to play like football with some of their city workers and everything. So we knew, regardless of whether we achieved or not, we always knew that the teacher always did care for us, and would set us extra homework and everything. And I guess what a teacher's there to do is not necessarily offer you their vision of life, but to unlock. They're just unlocking what's within you, and you can choose to take that advice or not choose to take that advice. But the teacher always offers it.
That's very good. I mean, just from a school perspective, I mean, the reality is that I'm sure we've got sort of what we call success stories on stage here, and some in the audience as well. The reality is there are some children potentially who won't necessarily benefit, and I think part of it also is. It's to do with what the children put in, and I think it's also maybe the atmosphere at home as well. And actually, certainly in these cases, the parents are supportive to the extent that you guys participate in all the trips, you come to the school and all these kind of things. There are some cases where I think you've got to be realistic in a project like this, that you do have ultimately 2 hours a week, and there is a bit of an element where if the parents aren't engaged, or they don't kind of try to see it through and sort of allow the children to stay for a few years, because that sort of the idea of that sort of B grade was very much for the children to join us at a sort of junior level, and then in the year 4 or 5 and stay with us through the years, because I think it is that element of creating something that's part of it becomes something that's actually then part of your kind of academic year. So just like after summer you go back to school, your main school, you also go back to Saturday school, and that kind of builds up. So I think that's what we sort of try to do. But the reality is that there will be some of the students necessarily don't benefit as much. But I guess a project like this, it's trying to give the opportunities to those who want to take it, who wouldn't necessarily have got those opportunities. We can provide it. And there are some cases where you have the children who potentially, if they hadn't had that, then maybe you are making that sort of that difference to where if they hadn't come to the school. So it's always there, but it's not always, we haven't got sort of every single child is a glowing success story. That's just the reality of it is, and that's with everything. But we certainly do our best, and it's an open project, as you know. So we don't sort of exclude children unless we find they're necessarily disruptive to the other children in quite an extreme way. I think there's only probably been maybe one certainly through my experience, maybe one child who had to be excluded. And, you know, that was ultimately because of, you know, he had learning difficulties that we didn't have the resources to deal with. But it's trying to sort of have that impact as much as we can. Yeah, question.
Maybe a question to the sister who also is a teacher. What talk about the benefits and the kind of experience of being a teacher and what you gain from that.
I would definitely say patience. That's probably the most obvious one. I think, especially with like years 4 and 5, where you know they kind of lose their concentration easily, and you kind of get to a point where you're just like, okay, I've told you to be quiet now like several times. Okay, can you please pay attention? But I think it's really rewarding because like even though you do get like okay, like pay attention, it's like when you like see them understand it, or when they come up to you and be like, oh miss, like what you taught me this week, like it came up in school and like I understood it and I could do it, and you're just like, okay, wow, like I'm actually doing something positive here, I'm actually helping them like progress with their learning, and it's such a big thing to help out with, especially at that age, because they're kind of building up their confidence, and to be able to like input into that and to help them be more confident in themselves and in the way that they learn and stuff, it's just, it is really like rewarding for yourself to be able to, especially like to be able to give back, like from being a student and then being able to give back what I was basically given and help out younger students. I think it is a very rewarding experience.
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
I wondered whether the city circle school was on the radar of Ofsted, or whether you've had any like difficulties or issues, or it's been fine with the bureaucracy of setting up a school outside of the standard school system. And I wondered whether I could ask questions with students, because I really enjoyed hearing about your experiences. I'm actually really jealous that you had such great experiences. It's really nice to hear. I had less favourable experiences of my Islamic school or Quranic school where I come from. And I just wondered whether when you left school, or when you went and joined bigger peer groups, whether you, if my understanding is correct, I understand that English and maths is the main focus.
Yeah.
It's more academic, but if you guys did Islamic studies specifically, whether coming across peers at university or whatever, whether you noticed that your experiences of being taught Islamic studies was markedly better than others, and whether that made a difference in what outlook they had going into sort of end of teenagehood, beginning of young adulthood.
That was a really important point you brought up, because I feel that we had a very balanced outlook on Islamic studies, and we were not just rooted. They taught us how to apply our Islam in whatever context, whether it was the work context, the university context, or so. And they answered questions, really difficult questions that even parents don't answer. Things like dating, things like relationships, things like just taboo subjects. They give you like proper, honest answers. And I remember reflecting on your experience. I remember meeting a couple of people who'd gone to madrasas, and you know, university, when I was at SOAS, like they're completely off the rails, drinking, smoking, God knows doing what else. And I got to know them like more as people, and then it surfaced that one person that I spoke to, she'd gone to an Islamic school, and there was indications that there was some sort of abuse, both physical and otherwise, and there was like it was more about rules rather than the spirit, and I felt that in Saturday school that I really gained that spirit, and I used to really look forward to my Islamic studies classes, and I think like there's not enough sort of Islamic resources available for, at that time at least, there wasn't enough available in English. Now you have the Norman Ali Khans of the world and everything, but we were like the prototype in a sense.
Was that make
you were talking about my peers. So I would meet obviously at university my peers who'd have very different values, who also went to certain Islamic schools that they just wanted to get away from their past, etc. I think what the difference was is that the Saturday school enabled me to formalise ideas and ask questions, and especially the question why, like why this, why that, and a lot of teachers sometimes wouldn't know the answer, and they'd be like, okay, I don't know, but this is what I do know, and I'll do a little bit of research on that and I'll come back to you. I think it was a real platform for you as a growing adult for you to formalise your own ideas on that and allowing everybody else to be okay with that. And so you sort of have that element of open-mindedness about it, and it wasn't, saying, no, you can't do this, you have to do this. It was more of understanding as to why, and that element is really important, I think, as you're growing up, because you try to make patterns in your head and understand how these things fit together into your everyday life. So then you can be comfortable in your own skin as to why you see things in a certain way, and therefore you can actually have conversations with people who have contradictory views to yourself, and that debate being also an okay thing as well. Yeah.
I think also with Islamic studies it helps you create goals for yourself. So I think, like, from personal experiences and from experiences from my peers, like when I was at Arabic school and we'd have Islamic studies, they'd kind of just teach you like these rulings and like the history and like the stories and stuff like that, which was, it was interesting, but in terms of applying it to my own life, like how do I like translate that? So I think when I had Islamic studies, they do that. They'd be like, okay, like this Ramadan, like what goals do you have? Like what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to finish like reading the whole of the Quran? Like write out these goals and like, make it real on paper. And then, come back after Ramadan and see if you did it and like see how you can continue on with like what was going on. And like they made it applicable to life instead of just teaching you these like rulings that you probably were like, okay, how am I supposed to implement this now? They actually helped you translate that into something more like contextual. So, yeah.
Thank you. I mean, just again, the Islamic studies certainly at the school, just to put it again a bit in context, I think, and maybe it's very much, it's not a prescriptive approach. I think ultimately because the instructors are, I think there's a recognition of, there's no real authority to some extent other than maybe life experience and maybe a bit more kind of understanding and having gone through a system. So as kind of Anissa touched upon, there were many cases where we wouldn't necessarily, the teachers who did it wouldn't necessarily feel they knew the answer, or they'd be prepared to explore the answer with the children on certain topics. And often things aren't necessarily right or wrong or black or white. And I think especially the older kids, there was often, things would come in the news that particular week and that would sort of be brought out in the discussion. So I think that kind of varied, but I would say it's very much kind of a discussion with that group to sort of allow them to share their views and bring something to the table. And again, with the younger children, the idea was to really create something that was, I think, as you said, is to create a positive Islamic studies experience. So the ambition was always to say that how we structure it is the Islamic studies is after the maths and English. For the younger children, it was almost meant to be their treat for their 2 hours. So whether it was just listening to stories or whether it was just sort of colouring in pictures or making Eid cards or those kind of things. But the idea is that we wanted them to have a very positive, because your experiences are unique, and many of us probably had that experience as a teaching group as well, of probably less than positive experiences at the local masjid or the madrasa and so forth. So that was very much the focus as well. We're not experts here, this is not really, if they want something more rigorous, then fine, there are other opportunities, but this is to say what can we bring is again in that idea that, we've been through certain things and maybe we can, bring our advice to the table, inshallah. Randy, you have a question? Yeah, and we'll wrap it up for this, yeah.
To get back to the gentleman on that, I think the government only announced this week plans to register all supplementary schools, which would include our one. The main objective behind that is really targeting the ones that give you the less than positive experience that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Some of us were describing.
And I don't know whether you've been fully involved in the bureaucracy involved in that, but has it been a positive experience? I mean, are you on Ofsted's radar?
So as a supplementary school up to now, we haven't been.
Supplementary schools won't come under the Ofsted radar, even under this new legislation.
And to be honest, the legislation is reasonably, I would say it's much lighter. I mean, you've got certain things like safeguarding and things, and I mean, again, a lot of it is, I think, it's advisable policies as opposed to prescriptive necessary policies. So, for example, all our teachers will have a CRB check done. We have kind of safeguarding policies in place and sort of infrastructure, but I think there is that degree of flexibility within supplementary schools. I mean, I don't think necessarily we found it sort of onerous, because ultimately I think most of this stuff is, I guess, it's useful and it's important. You know, there isn't sort of unnecessary forms to fill in. I mean, in terms of the kind of admin, you know, the approach is to keep it quite limited, so that, you know, even for the teachers and stuff, because we do recognise that the volunteers give up, you know, their mornings, so they would kind of try to limit, so there's, you know, the limit the interaction they have to do beyond that. Just sort of, we'll wrap it up now. I think there will obviously be an opportunity now just to catch up with everyone, just a few sort of, I guess, announcements to make or comments to make. I mean, a lot of this was talking about the Saturday school and the mentoring that comes from it. So we're always open to volunteers to help with either in our West London school, in Westbourne Park, or in the Harrow school. We're also looking to launch a new school in Southall as well, with Rosmina, who's at the front. She'll just put her hand up. That's sort of it. I think. I mean, it's in the stage where we've got now a venue which is confirmed, which is, to be honest, half the battle. So now we're looking to get sort of good volunteers with a view potentially to open up, if not sort of by September next year, if not before that. So if you do have any questions, or if that's an area that helps you, or if you're sort of keen, I think also for that project, if you're keen to kind of get involved at a, I would say, more of a startup level, so that you want to be involved in actually setting up and some of the ideas and the thought process, then I think that's particularly good to get involved in, as opposed to the other schools where there's the opportunity to teach. And with that teaching and touching upon that, I think also is the fact that to certainly with teaching, there's, you know, they talked about these mentors and so forth, but none, I think that if you look at maybe one out of the whole body have any formal sort of teaching experience or any formal instruction and education. And that's something that we stress, so you don't have to have that to volunteer. You don't have to necessarily have a teaching sort of any kind of qualification, certainly. I think it's just the enthusiasm, the desire to sort of help out. Because the class sizes are smaller, you're in a group of teachers, so you have that support network. And obviously, if there are other projects you want to get involved in with that City Circle, there's the Homeless Project and so forth. There are volunteer forms at the back. If you want to find out more, or you want to get involved with the City Circle more broadly. But thank you very much for your time, inshallah, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.